Everyone wants to know what the best class or spec is to play in Mists of Pandaria before the game comes out because they want to start getting them ready now. So I'm going to tell you my personal top 3 melee DPS that not only are going to be able to put out amazing damage but also bring lots to your raid. Whilst all of the specs mentioned will pump throughout the expansion, we are focusing purely on the first phase of content because all the classes scale completely differently as they get more powerful set bonuses and access to more secondary stats as we get better gear. But these are what I would consider 3 very safe bets in the first tier of content. I've already done the same for tanks and healers, but if you want a more detailed dive into all of the classes, then go and check the other videos out on the channel. I want to keep this as close to 5 minutes as possible. So firstly is the Rogue, and specifically Sub-Rogue. Not only is it one of the highest single target DPS across the board, not just amongst melee, it's also no longer completely shafted on AoE anymore because of the addition of combo points coming from Fan and Knives, and also the addition of Crimson Tempest, which is an AoE finisher. So where at the moment, yes, in Cataclysm, Sub-Rogue absolutely pumps, as soon as there's extra targets, they start to fall behind because all they've really got is single target. Well, that's not the case anymore. They can do reasonable AoE and exceptional single target. Having a rogue in the team can really simplify Will of the Emperor Heroic as well, which is the final boss in Mogosham Vaults, and will make any rogue in a 10-man or multiple rogues in a 25-man extremely sought after. The entire fight is an ad fight, and as you kill ads, sparks spawn, and these sparks need soaking. Rogues can soak these for days and need almost no help. So having a rogue for the final boss is also extremely useful and worthy of a mention. Smoke Bomb is actually really useful now, where up until this point Hagara and Dragon Soul is about the only place where Smoke Bombs had any use. Now it's an actual flat damage reduction for everybody stood in your Smoke Bomb, and it's a substantial damage reduction as well, being 20%. Shroud of Concealment for rogues is absolutely amazing as well to be able to skip trash, and it's really fun in PvP as well, because you can mass stealth your entire group and bypass trash that could be in challenge modes, raids, dungeons, literally anywhere. And excluding Hunter's Pets, rogues are one of only 2 classes that can actually bring the spell damage taken debuff as well, which is incredibly valuable. Whilst I know you're probably not overly bothered about what they bring and what they don't bring and what gets added, you just want to know if they do great damage, and they absolutely do, which is exactly why it's made it to number 1 in my top 3. Secondly, will probably come as no surprise at all, is a warrior, and specifically we're talking Arms Warrior early on. Whilst Fury does pick up and even overtake Arms much later in the expansion, if you're wanting to be competitive as a warrior, you're going to find yourself as Arms. Now, Arms is an absolute pumper DPS in both single target and AoE. The rotation feels so much more fluid without having to stance dance, because certain stances are no longer needed for certain abilities. Instead, the stances give separate bonuses, which I'll put on screen now, and depending on what you want will depend on what stance you're in. So actually every stance can be useful as every spec of warrior, given the right situation. Even as a DPS warrior, you can now bring Vigilance, which is a 30% damage reduction cooldown, which ordinarily you're going to use on your tank. Being able to bring such a powerful external cooldown to your tank and still bring things like Rallying Cry, which is going to increase everyone's max health at times where high damage is about to come in, just makes a warrior's toolkit insane. And if that ain't enough, you also get 3 new additions in the form of banners. Only 2 of the banners are really relevant, but you get Demoralizing Banner, which reduces the damage done by enemy targets that are near the banner by 10%, meaning they do 10% less damage, your raid takes 10% less damage. And then the big one, which is Skull Banner, which increases critical strike damage by 20%. And this is for the entire raid. So if you're pairing things like Skull Banner with Stormlash from a Shaman and then popping Bloodlust, this is mental damage, and it gets really good when we get access to certain trinkets in places like Throne of Thunder. And there's even some really small changes like Slam. Now, Slam does really good damage, obviously, and you're used to using Slam in your rotation already. But it's now instant, so it's not got that annoying cast time anymore. And when you've got Sweeping Strikes active, 35% of the damage dealt by Slam also hits any other target within 2 yards. So yes, it's a very short range, but the fact that Slam just flat out AoEs everything as well, when you've already got things like Bloodbath and Blade Storm together, so you're absolutely melting stuff, and then as soon as that finishes, you can still start firing out loads of damage with slams on everything that you've just got bleeding from Bloodbath. The amount of damage you can put out is just absolutely insane. And of course, you bring so much utility, even with things like an AoE interrupt. And then third in my top 3 for melee DPS might be one that takes you by surprise because you've not really heard a great deal about them, but it would have to be Unholy DK. Now, if we're talking purely from a damage perspective, I think Unholy DK in the first phase is going to be exactly the same as they was in Wrath of the Lich King and even the first phase of Kata, they're going to be absolutely pumping. They have incredibly high, consistent, sustained damage and even get an execute ability now, which is called Soul Reaper. It deals weapon damage and afflicts the target with Soul Reaper, and after 5 seconds, if the target's below 35% health, it's going to do a truckload of damage to them, and if the enemy dies before the effect triggers, you get 50% haste for 5 seconds. You'll still be building stacks up and using Dark Transformation. You'll still be using Gargoyle as a big DPS cooldown. And overall, really, the rotation doesn't change all that much. But being able to bring things like Anti-Magic Zone just from talent, so every spec of DK can bring this. Having an amazing off-spec if you needed to tank at any point, because Blood DK is also going to be insane in the first phase, and made my number 1 out of top 3 tanks. A mass AoE grip called Gorefiend's Grasp, where you can grip all enemies within a 20-yard range of a target, all to that location, or even Remorseless Winter, which is an AoE stun, which slowly ramps up, slowing their movement speed until it finally stuns them for 6 seconds. 3 very different ways to manage your resource now at your level 75 talents, being Blood Tap, Runic Empowerment, and Runic Corruption, and even getting a little bit of a movement speed increase with Death's Advance. It's only a 30% movement speed increase on a 30-second cooldown, but while you've got the talent, it's just a passive 10% speed boost. I should even mention the fact that if you don't run Anti-Magic Zone because it's not needed on a particular fight, you can run Purgatory, which essentially gives you a second life. When you take fatal damage that's going to kill you, there's a few seconds your healers get to essentially heal you out of Purgatory, and you'll still be alive. The Unholy DK, whilst in my opinion personally doesn't go through drastic amounts of changes in comparison to some of the other classes, it's going to be absolutely pumping in the first phase, and I'll be really shocked if it's not. And once we're in the beta and we're actually getting to see all this at endgame, we'll know whether this was right or wrong, but these would definitely be safe choices in my opinion. Now, if you enjoyed the video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Consider joining the channel as a member like these guys scrolling down on the screen have, and I'll see you on the next one.